Good morning. Well, we're looking at this book of Leviticus and we're seeing these regulations being set up by Moses to govern the people. And he set up these priests and gave them the instructions so that they could keep an eye on what is happening. They were not to be the people who ploughed the ground. They were not to be the people who looked after the cattle or to be the shepherds. They were instead supposed to be looking after the people's spiritual health and their mental health, yes, and their physical health. You know, even in the forces today, in our armies, we have the normal soldiers, the soldiers doing the work, the people who are being trained. But we also get the medical officers in the regiments. And the medical officers go to the commanding officer and they say there's a problem, there's a difficulty, this person is not fit to work, this person has this problem. They are supposed to keep an eye on the physical health of the people. But as well as in the present day regiments, there is a chaplain as well. And the chaplain is not there just to conduct services. I mean, that's part of his work. Of course, he gathers the people, he teaches there, as you would in any parish church. He proclaims the gospel to the people, and he shows the soldiers and the people in the regiment what it is that God is asking of them. But he has another function as well, and again, this function relates to the commanding officer. To go to the commanding officer and warn if something is going wrong within the regiment, to try to put it right. You see, when men and women are trained to a very high standard, but trained in order to fight, trained in order to act in a certain way, it releases within them certain abilities and certain characteristics. And these have got to be kept under control. Because when these people are almost set free to do the work that they train for, they must still do it in an ethical way. They must still do it according to the rules and regulations set down. And it's part of the spiritual function of the chaplain is to make sure that somehow, because these people have been given the tools in order to injure others and to take place in battles, that somehow this hasn't somehow infected them in some way, so they become careless about the way they use them. So medical officers are there looking after their physical health, yes, and their mental health. And the chaplains are there as well, making sure that somehow the training has not distorted them, so they have a false image of who they are and what they should be doing. And it was the same thing amongst the tribes in Israel. The rabbis were given this particular purpose and this particular talent to go out and look at what is happening and be sure that things will be done properly and correctly. Because God has a certain relationship with his people, and he has a certain relationship with them. Although he wants them to do what he wants, he realizes that in certain circumstances, yes, they will have to fight. In certain circumstances, they will have to act in a way which you would not normally act in as far as their everyday lives are concerned. But they must act in those ways in an ethical way and be able to do it properly and correctly. If you look forward in time, you find that these priests had to make decisions. And as they go on in time, they have to examine the laws that Moses gave them and make decisions about this. And I want to take you forward in time now to a time when, in fact, Israel had been conquered again, this time by the Greeks. And as they were conquered by the Greeks, there arose a Greek leader over the area where Israel existed. His name was Antiochus Epiphanes. And he decided that he would try to destroy Judaism. He was decided he would try to turn these people into Greeks, with a Greek means of thinking. And part of the things he did was to try to stop them from acting in the ways that Moses had instructed them. He went to such an extent with this that suddenly there was a rebellion amongst the people. And this rebellion was led by the great Maccabean family. The main leader here was Judas Maccabeus. He defeated this Greek army and drove them back and finally reoccupied Jerusalem and rebuilt the temple. It is the great feast of Hanukkah, which the Jewish people keep towards the end of the year, the reconsecration of the temple. But as he was doing these battles, they were hit with different problems. Because what the Greeks had realized, of course, was these Jews were not supposed to work on the Sabbath day. So if they attacked them on the Sabbath day, they'd find them helpless because they weren't supposed to fight. But these rabbis and these priests had to settle down and think and pray out what God's will was. So they were taking the laws that Moses set down and almost not adapting them, but changing them for the circumstances in which they found themselves. And as they did it in generation after generation, they came to the great Maccabees and they said, when you're in a situation like this, yes, you can fight even on the Sabbath. You can fight on the Sabbath, because in here you're doing it to protect your lives and to protect the lives of your families and of the nation itself. So they had taken the rules that Moses had given them, but they had adapted them in these cases of emergency. Amen.